Information overload is something we all suffer from right now, right? We have our smartphones that are sending us emails. We have kids who are telling us what they did that day. We have colleagues who are calling us, and we have social media and Facebook, and the amount of information that comes into our lives every day is just overwhelming. And so this question emerges: why are some people so good at maintaining their focus? Why do they manage to ignore the distractions and pay attention to the information that's important, while others get completely overwhelmed by it? Well, it turns out that psychologists have studied this quite a bit, and what they've discovered is that there's this condition known as information blindness. Much like snow blindness that occurs when there's too much snow and you look at a landscape and you can't tell the trees from the hills, information blindness emerges when there's too much information and we can't tell which parts of it are important and aren't. And yet some people are able to navigate this informational landscape. The reason why is because they're good at building what's known as mental models. In other words, they tell themselves stories about what's going on as it goes on. In fact, one of my favorite examples of this was a Qantas air flight that occurred a couple of years ago, where mid-air there was a huge accident. One of the engines essentially exploded and ripped a huge hole in one of the wings. And yet the pilot was able to land that plane safely because at some point he just started thinking of it as a Cessna. Now, the plane that was injured was a 747, one of the most complex planes on Earth. But the plane that was inside his head, the story he was telling himself, was of this small Cessna, a small little, almost hobbyist plane. But by telling himself a story about a Cessna, about what was going on, by giving himself a mental model to decide which pieces of information to pay attention to and which to ignore, he had some way of maintaining his focus. And as a result, they landed, hundreds of people were saved, and the worst mid-air disaster in modern history had not one casualty. Mental models, telling ourselves stories about ourselves, that's how we can learn to manage this flood of information and to keep our focus.